All right, good morning. The Committee on Homeland Security, Oversight, Investigations, Accountability under the broader Homeland Security Committee will come to order. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine how China is using illegal marijuana to build a criminal network across America. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, the Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability Committee is holding this hearing on how the use of illegal marijuana as tied into the criminal network tracing to China is impacting the United States. First, for order of business and announcement, the gentleman from Texas, Al Green, will, from this point forward, be serving on the Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability Subcommittee for the remainder of the 119th Congress, and we look forward to working with him. We are here today to talk about an important issue, significant national security implications. This issue has been prevalent not just in Oklahoma, my home state, but in many other states, Maine, California, and all across our homeland. Let's paint the picture together. A group of Chinese nationals affiliated with foreign criminal organization crosses the southern border, makes their way into rural Oklahoma. With them are workers who have been lured under the false promise of good jobs in the United States. Once in Oklahoma, these Chinese nationals approach a local resident with an offer they cannot refuse. They offer the resident several hundreds of thousands of dollars, purchasing, using their time, their identity, to purchase a nearby tract of land. In return, the resident gets to keep a share of the money with no questions asked. The deal is quick and it's simple. In a matter of days, this newly purchased land becomes the site of a large-scale illegal marijuana grow operation. The workers find themselves forced to work 14-hour days under the watch of armed guards, all while being confined to small living quarters, minimal running water or air conditioning. The smell of toxic fumes, fumigation from pesticides that are lit on fire that we know have caused major health consequences, banned in this country, are utilized for these grow operations. Hundreds of pounds of illegal, contaminated marijuana is then produced, ends up in the hands of people all over the United States, from Oklahoma to New York. This is just one example of how Chinese grow operations come to operation in communities all across the country. Oklahoma has had thousands of these operations activate at one time. Sadly, as we'll learn today, this is only scratching the surface of what these Chinese-affiliated criminal groups are doing. Many Chinese illegal operations serve as fronts for a wider criminal enterprise, including human and drug trafficking, prostitutions, weapons smuggling, and money laundering. And while the example I highlighted takes place in our home state of Oklahoma, similar patterns are repeated in other states like Maine, Massachusetts, California. In fact, there are thousands of these grow operations dispersed through our entire country, including tribal lands and national parks. We have a really excellent panel of expert witnesses before us today who are going to walk us through this issue and how it affects the Homeland Security posture. Specifically, I'd like to focus our conversation on the serious crimes taking place inside of these illegal grow sites, as well as how Chinese transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, many with directly ties to the Chinese Communist Party, are setting up these sites all across the U.S. as they expand an underground criminal network in our backyard. We are holding this hearing today because we've enabled these foreign organizations with potential links to the CCP to build up a sophisticated network throughout the United States, which facilitates a wide range of other criminal activity and presents a national security threat. This is a convergence of organized crime, human drug trafficking, public health risks, all operating at scale and sophistication, crossing state, national lines beyond the normal capabilities of state and local law enforcement to combat. These agencies need the help of federal law enforcement to unravel these criminal networks. In fact, some of the foreign nationals running these grow operations are more heavily armed than local law enforcement. One of my field reps in Oklahoma heard from a journeyman electrician who was hired to do some work on a rural property. When he arrived at the site, he found what appeared to be a large foreign-run marijuana grow house, and he personally observed an armory of dozens of assault rifles and ammunition crates. This network must be uncovered and eliminated from our homeland. And it's really that simple. The potential threat that comes from having fully operational criminal network associated with top foreign adversary on our soil is too great to ignore. I look forward to an informative and productive discussion. I now turn it over to Ranking Member Thanadar for his opening remarks.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman. And good morning to all of our witnesses here. I want to welcome my colleague, Congressman Al Green from Texas, on this committee, and look forward to his contribution to our proceedings here. Now, if you take a stroll through DC's neighborhoods, you're likely to encounter the National Guard planting flowers or picking up trash, and federal agents making traffic stops. This supposed crackdown on crime has also played out in Los Angeles, is unfolding in Chicago, soon coming to Memphis, and being threatened by the Vice President that they are on their way or coming to Detroit if needed. Trump's occupation of America's largest city is reducing the federal government's ability to pursue serious, complex crimes. HSI agents have paused pursuing human traffickers. DEA agents are not uncovering drug rings, and FBI agents stopping investigating financial fraud. Instead, they issue citations for open containers of alcohol, fare evasion, and traffic offenses. The same federal agents who investigate money laundering and organized crime are also being deployed to Home Depot parking lots to arrest migrants looking for work. Who is investigating the thousands of illegal marijuana farms that currently exist in this country? And I'm not talking about someone who is growing a handful of pot plants consistent with their state's law and regulations. I'm referring to marijuana that is being grown by organized crime in our federal forest, business districts, and suburban neighborhoods, perhaps even at the house next door. These illegal grow sites are run by Mexican cartels, Cuban drug traffickers, and increasingly Chinese organized crime. Just a few months ago, in my home state of Michigan, local law enforcement arrested 4 Chinese nationals after discovering over 5,000 marijuana plants worth around $5 million in a warehouse. The billions of dollars in proceeds from illegal marijuana help finance China's Belt and Road initiatives, a plan to wrestle global influence away from the United States through foreign investment in developing nations that the Trump administration has cut aid to. The illegal marijuana proceeds also fuel Mexican cartels that traffic deadly fentanyl to the United States. The marijuana black market is riddled with human trafficking, human smuggling, and forced labor. All too often, migrants are lured to farm with the promise of decent work. Once they arrive, their identification is taken away, and they are forced to work 16 hours a day and live in substandard conditions. Illegal marijuana cultivation sites are also stealing our scarce resources, such as water and electricity, while poisoning public lands and banned toxic chemicals and pesticides. Illegal marijuana farms are a threat to our national security, human rights, and the environment. The federal government has had some successes through the organized crime, drug enforcement, and task force. For example, in January 2024, a federal jury found 2 Chinese nationals guilty of possessing and distributing marijuana. Over a 7-month period, they shipped 56,000 pounds of marijuana from Oklahoma to the East Coast. In June 2024, the Justice Department charged associates of Mexico's Sinaloa drug cartel for conspiring with groups linked to Chinese underground banking to launder drug trafficking proceeds. Despite these wins and others, the Trump administration has proposed eliminating funding for the OCDETF. I am leery that OCDETF is being replaced with Homeland Security Task Force that will further elevate immigration enforcement at the expense of other law enforcement missions, including those best suited to tackle illegal marijuana. The multifaceted threats posed by illegal marijuana farms run by organized crime require a coordinated national strategy and the resources to carry out that strategy. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses about the resources required of the federal government to snuff our illegal marijuana. Thank you all, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
The ranking member yields. Thank you to the other members of the committee. We are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have a panel of witnesses, expert in their field, before us today to speak to this very important topic. I ask that our witnesses please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and please be seated. I would now like to formally introduce our witnesses. Mr. Donnie Anderson is the director of the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, a native of Oklahoma. He has served in law enforcement for nearly 3 decades. Mr. Paul Larkin is a senior legal research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He has worked in the federal government at the Department of Justice and the EPA's Criminal Investigative Division, as well as the private sector as a public policy researcher. And our third witness, Mr. Chris Urban, is a managing director of Nardello & Company, a global investigations consulting firm, and previously served as a special agent, senior official at the Drug Enforcement Administration for 24 years. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I now recognize Director Anderson for 5 minutes for his opening statement, and I think that you traveled the longest from Oklahoma, Mr. Anderson, to be here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking members, and members of the committee for inviting me to participate in today's hearings and your interest in Chinese-owned marijuana farms. This topic is not of only a public safety interest, but also the interest of America's national security. My name is Donnie Anderson. I am the director of the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. I've dedicated over 34 years of my life to public safety and drug enforcement in the state of Oklahoma. I can say without hesitation that the impact of black market marijuana in Oklahoma is unlike anything I've ever encountered in my career. What is even more alarming is the growing influence and involvement of the Chinese Communist Party in this illicit industry. Please understand that what I share today represents only a fraction of the broader threat we face. Several investigations remain open. I am unable to comment on them further without jeopardizing the integrity, endangering the brave men and women at the Bureau who are investigating these cases, or violating the laws to prohibit disclosure of active investigations. In 2018, Oklahoma voters approved medical marijuana State Question 788, drafted by marijuana advocates. Unfortunately, the law imposed no limits on the number of grow operations or the quantity of plants each could cultivate. This lack of regulations led to a staggering oversupply. Between March of 2024 to March of 2025, licensed grow sites reported 87,210,960 plants in the state of Oklahoma, yet dispensaries sold just a little over 1.6 million pounds of marijuana in a dispensary. Given that one plant typically yields 1 pound of processed marijuana, over 85 million plants are unaccounted for, representing an estimated $153 billion in missing product and proceeds. To put this in perspective, as of September the 9th, 2025, Oklahoma has 324,850 licensed medical marijuana patients. The scale of unreported inventory is deeply troubling, especially considering the black market producers routinely underreport their plant count. Oklahoma's medical marijuana framework has inadvertently opened the door to international organized crime. Criminal actors exploit the system to produce high-potency marijuana for black market distribution, fueling what is now estimated to be a $153 billion illicit industry. A particular concern is a high prevalence of Chinese nationals involved in these operations. Their presence has a profound effect on both our state and national security. Consider the following examples. In 2022, 4 Chinese nationals were executed in an illegal marijuana farm near Hennessy, Oklahoma. A 5th individual was seriously injured. The operation used a fraudulent license obtained via a straw ownership. April of 2024, law enforcement arrested multiple suspects in connection with a robbery and homicide at a grow site in Okfuskee County in Oklahoma. The victim, 53-year-old Harry Dam, was fatally shot. July of 2025, a Canadian national was found murdered execution style at a grow operation near Lake Thunderbird just east of Norman, Oklahoma. The death is believed to be the result of a targeted robbery. The investigation remains ongoing currently. These incidents are just a few among many. Beyond these murders, state authorities have documented a sharp rise in violent crime linked to black market marijuana operations masquerading as legal enterprises. The Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics reports associated crimes including human and sex trafficking, money laundering, illegal gambling, extortion, theft of water and electricity. Our agency currently employs 1 Mandarin-speaking agent. However, this is insufficient when suspects communicate in Cantonese and Fujianese, languages that Mandarin speakers cannot reliably translate. Compounding this issue is the widespread use of WeChat, a Chinese-owned platform used for both communication and financial transactions. Because WeChat is based in mainland China and encrypted, U.S. law enforcement cannot serve legal process or conduct electronic surveillance as we would with domestic platforms. These apps fall outside the scope of the Communication Act of 1996 and Electronic Communications Privacy Act of 1986, making them a major obstacle in our investigations. Oklahoma law requires marijuana business owners to be state residents with at least 2 years of residency. Yet nearly all Chinese-operated grows circumvent this requirement through fraud and straw ownership. In one instance, a single Oklahoman was listed as the owner of approximately 300 marijuana farms in Oklahoma. This widespread fraud is facilitated by consulting firms, real estate agents, and attorneys who help establish these shell operations. Alarmingly, many of these grows are located near critical infrastructure, including military bases and pipelines. For example, in an ongoing investigation, the Department of Defense reported suspicious activity at a marijuana grow operated by an ethnic Chinese group located adjacent to the McAllister ammunition plant. This ammunition plant is the largest in the United States that is also responsible for manufacturing the Moab massive ordnance air blast bomb and houses close to the third of the department. It maintains a third of the Department of Defense's munitions stockpile. That's where it's at in McAllister, Oklahoma. This is no doubt the Chinese government has shown interest in Oklahoma's marijuana authority. We have documented financial transfers to the Bank of China and connections to businesses owned by the Chinese government. These concerns have amplified by recent reports of CCP activity in operations like Salt Typhoon, which my agency was directly affected. Regardless of property ownership, it is my belief that the CCP maintains access to these sites, particularly through its known practices of controlling expatriates via so-called police stations. Thank you for your time and attention to this critical issue. I'm available to answer any questions you may have or to provide additional information as needed.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I now recognize Director Larkin for 5 minutes for his opening statement.
For 60 years, one of the primary arguments made in favor of the legalization of cannabis is that it will eliminate the black market. The rationale given was that people would prefer to avoid criminal prosecution for using cannabis, and they would like to purchase it from a store with a quality reputation and a quality product. Over the last 5 to 10 years, we now know that that argument is a fugazi. The black market has not disappeared, even though a majority of states in the United States now have approved either medical or recreational use marijuana programs. In fact, the problem that you have taken up is a matter not just of public health, which is the way cannabis issues are normally thought of. It's a matter of domestic or homeland and national security. Why? The businesses that we see across the nation selling cannabis for medical or recreational purposes are not run by 50s-era beatniks or 60s-era hippies. They are run by Chinese organized crime with the tacit knowledge and acquiescence by the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party, two entities that are sworn enemies of the United States. That raises a clear homeland and national security aspect of this problem that has been under-discussed in all the debates over cannabis legalization. This is a serious problem. According to the Whitney Economics Organization, the cannabis market is a $100 billion industry. 75% of it is the illegal market, and 2/3 of the cannabis sold in the United States is grown domestically. So we're talking not just about somebody who is growing 5 plants in a home in connection with, and as authorized by a state law. We're talking about people growing massive quantities who are part of an organization that has nothing but the worst interests of people in our neighborhoods in mind. I mean, the existence of this black market is recognized by numerous parties. Senator Joni Ernst and 49 other members of Congress sent a letter to then Attorney General Merrick Garland asking him to look into this. There have been numerous other organizations and think tanks that have written about it. And there are beaucoup media stories, written, print, or in the TV media on this. They all agree that this is a serious problem because it is not simply the illegal distribution of controlled substances that is at issue. It is all of the associated crimes that occur. As the ranking member pointed out, we'll see money laundering, human trafficking, prostitution, fraud, and various types of violent crimes, including homicides, as my colleague has pointed out. All of these damage our local communities. But it's not just that. The money that Chinese organized crime made from illegal fentanyl sales has helped underwrite their cannabis business in the United States. And the money that they make in the current operations can be used to spread those operations into other states and other areas, as well as for other purposes that do not have the best interests of the United States in mind. Now, if this were just simply a small-scale matter rather than a coast-to-coast matter, it might not merit the attention of anything other than the legislatures, the executive branch, and law enforcement in those states and neighborhoods. But it is, in fact, from coast to coast, from Maine to California. And Oklahoma, which is probably halfway between, has seen a very serious problem, as for the reasons my colleague gave, because there is unlimited grows allowed in that state. Now, as I mentioned before, this is not simply a problem of domestic people that have broke bad. The Chinese organized crime elements are working with the tacit knowledge and acquiescence of the PRC and CCP. Now, the law does not require a formal agreement amongst those parties in order for them to be held criminally liable. As I have explained in some of my writings, the conspiracy laws allow someone to put together a case based on various types of circumstantial evidence, of which there is an ample amount here. What we have is a national problem involving a drug that, unfortunately, is seen as being milder in some ways than others, and pharmacologically, in many respects, it is. But cannabis is very harmful if you use it on a long-term basis or in very serious doses. I am glad that you're holding this hearing, and I'm glad to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Larkin. Mr. Urban, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes.
Committee Chairman Garbarino, Committee Ranking Member Thompson, Ranking Member Thanadar, and distinguished members of this subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity today to address you on the growth of Chinese organized crime in the United States and the role of marijuana cultivation and distribution in facilitating that growth. During my 24-year career with the DEA as an agent and executive, I saw firsthand the damage done by transnational criminal organizations, TCOs, and the increasingly significant operations of Chinese transnational criminal organizations. Over the last 5 years of my career, I led a team at DEA's Special Operations Division, SOD, dedicated to an operation called Project Sleeping Giant, which sought to understand, identify, target Chinese organized crime operating in the United States and abroad. We were particularly concerned about the rise of Chinese money laundering networks, which have transformed narcotics trafficking by offering dramatically lower rates, lower risk, and quicker return of funds than the networks that had previously laundered those funds. Project Sleeping Giant's objectives included understanding the Chinese organized crime threat, developing intelligence on it, and designing enforcement operations to mitigate it. As a result of the investigative and intelligence gathering operation, we learned that Chinese organized crime was involved in a wide range of criminal activity globally, including being the Chinese suppliers of precursor chemicals used in fentanyl production in Mexico, becoming the primary money launderers for the Mexican cartels, which have been recently designated as FTOs, human trafficking networks, global operations that corrupt government authorities, wildlife trafficking networks, and of course, Chinese-controlled marijuana cultivation within the United States. So what have the Chinese money launderers done with the proceeds of their criminal activity? Starting in 2017, when a wave of marijuana legalization was sweeping through the United States, we started seeing the profits of the laundering of Mexican cartel proceeds get invested into marijuana cultivation and distribution operations by Chinese money launderers. The speed and organization in which the Chinese-controlled marijuana grows were established was nothing short of remarkable. As the Chinese money launderers provided the funding for the grows, trafficked Chinese citizens into the United States to live at the grow locations, tending to the plants on a 24/7 basis. They then trafficked the marijuana to cities for sale. All of this happened seamlessly. It was extremely well organized because it was being managed by Chinese organized crime and Chinese money launderers at the leadership and command and control level. What is the best way to combat the threat? First, there is a critical need for local, state, and federal officials to recognize that activities including Chinese marijuana grows and distribution operations are not just weed cases. They are harmful in and of themselves, and they also help fuel Chinese money launderers and organized crime-linked activity, such as human trafficking, fentanyl distribution, and other dangerous, harmful activities. These cases should be prioritized as they are linked to the larger criminal networks. State and local governments individually do not have the necessary resources and authorities to attack and dismantle Chinese marijuana trafficking networks. State and local governments typically lack the subject matter experts, language skills, data scientists, confidential sources, and other law enforcement capabilities that are needed to address the threat. Federal funding, coordination, and authority combined with state and local resources, intelligence, and their authorities is desperately needed. It is essential to use the federal racketeering, money laundering, continuing criminal enterprise prosecutions to target the leadership and command and control levels of these operations, similar to what we did in the late 80s and 90s against Italian organized crime. For organized crime leaders, Chinese organized crime leaders need to understand that the federal government will aggressively target them with severe consequences. Using other federal authorities to target the related crimes such as human trafficking, money laundering, tax evasion, mortgage fraud, as well as state and local laws and regulations governing the cultivation operations themselves and those governing land, power use, and water violations will have a material impact. Lastly, even at the federal level, specialized task forces are needed to effectively target Chinese money launderers, Chinese organized crime engaged in marijuana trafficking activity. A fully funded intergovernmental platform will allow for law enforcement to better identify the criminal networks and dismantle them state by state. Congress can play a vital role in providing resources, incentives, and authority to the federal government. Thank you for the opportunity today to engage in this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Members will be recognized by seniority. For 5 minutes of questioning. Additional rounds of questioning may be called after all members have had the opportunity. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Director Anderson, can you describe how Oklahoma has become a hotbed for illegal marijuana grow operations? And can you put that in the context as it is compared against the other 49 states?
Well, what happened with Oklahoma was, one, Oklahoma is a very rural state, has a lack of resources when it comes to public safety. We also have very cheap farmland. We also have the most liberal marijuana laws in the union. So whenever Oklahoma enacted the medical marijuana statute that we passed, it opened up Pandora's box for Oklahoma. So what you had a very organized group of Chinese nationals who actually, this isn't just in the U.S., they're global with what they're doing, but they own the market of marijuana. They actually took a market that was the #1 cash drug crop for the cartel, and they own that, and they've owned that for several years now. They moved those operations because of crackdowns that were going on in New Mexico and California to Oklahoma. One, because it is rural. Two, the land is very, very cheap. What you can buy 80 acres in Oklahoma, what you can buy a block for in California. With our laxed laws, that is exactly what happened in Oklahoma.
Mr. Urban, you mentioned a minute ago, if I remember hearing you correctly, that $300 billion is what you all have seen is the 2025 number of illicit marijuana being moved across the United States. Did I understand that stat correctly, $300 billion?
I believe that's correct. It was in my written statement. So I believe the time period, it's a massive amount of money.
In tandem with what Mr. Anderson is talking about, when they're looking at the amount of plants in Oklahoma, compared that they have registration on, compared to what they know they're able to produce, and what's been unreported, Oklahoma alone believes they have a $150 billion per year illicit marijuana industry. To put that in context, the state budget of Oklahoma to run all areas of governance from the state level in Oklahoma is $13 billion. 10 times the state budget is the illegal activity of marijuana, and it's why it's sadly become, and I hate this for my state, a leading exporter of marijuana in this nation. Illegal marijuana export. It's almost half of the number that I think that the DEA is looking at. And that's it's just astounding. Director Anderson, what kind of response are we getting in Oklahoma in terms of knowing that what's opened this thing up? What do you think that it's going to take for the average person in Oklahoma to realize this is such a problem and that this is not something that we can, as you cite the homicides at Hennessy, we've got McAllister Army Ammunition Plant, that there's some activity adjacent to it, where 1/3 of all munitions for this country come for, in McAllister, Oklahoma, the congressional district that I represent, for our national defense, and Chinese nationalists adjacent to it, there's some concern about illicit activity. What is it going to take for Oklahoma, for the grassroots that ultimately manifests itself, where the legislature then makes some changes? What does the law enforcement have to do to get the attention of Oklahoma officials?
Thank you for the question. I wished I knew the answer to that because I've been trying for 5 years. I will say we are starting to gain traction now as far as global or nationwide what's going on in Oklahoma, because literally what's going on in Oklahoma, whenever I talk about the 85 million pounds that's unaccounted for, that's going across the U.S. And understand that's what we know is there. There's no telling how much that really is, because if we know there's 85 million unaccounted for, is there another 85 million or 100 billion that we don't know about? Because typically when we go into these operations, they don't have metric tags on them. They tag a few. You may have 30,000 plants, and they may have 1,000 of those tagged. So there's a lot more that's not tagged than there is tagged. But I do think we're making some headway as far as letting people know what's going on. And for me, this isn't about, I want to be very clear, this isn't just about marijuana. I'm not talking about mom or pop operations or even about people who utilize marijuana for whatever medical purpose they use it for. I'm talking about real organized transnational criminals who do not have our best interest at heart. When I say our best interest, I'm talking about the American people as a whole. So that is my biggest concern with what's going on with this whole catastrophe in Oklahoma.
Or for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, drug cartels and criminal organizations, including those from Mexico, Cuba, and China, are illegally cultivating marijuana across the United States. They are often disguise their illegal operations by hiding in states where law-abiding growers operate. But these illegal marijuana grows are dangerous. They rely on human trafficking for cheap labor and sexual exploitation. They steal water and energy from surrounding communities. They sow the grounds with pesticides and chemicals that seep or run off into our water. And they spray the marijuana with chemicals that end up being consumed by people here in the United States. Mr. Urban, how should the federal government respond to illegal marijuana cultivation, especially when it comes to combating international criminal organizations that are operating across the United States? What does a whole of government approach looks like from your experience?
So from my experience, sir, I mean, you laid out all the variety of crimes and activity that was taking place in these cultivation areas. I think it's very simply, we need to mandate a solution from the federal government. We need to provide the funding, for example, Mr. Anderson in Oklahoma. And what I would suggest is we need to target the network and defeat the whole network. So you can use Chinese organized crime as an example, but you could also lay other organized crime elements in this, but we'll stick with Chinese organized crime right now. Federal funding, a task force that would target that entire network operating in the United States abroad. The funding is expensive for personnel and overtime, as Mr. Anderson would probably attest to. There's air and land assets that you need, but we need a federal task force comprised of DEA, HSI, FBI to include their counterintelligence side, because there is an counterintelligence component to this. IRS, Fish and Wildlife, and then again, successes that we've had in the past, partnering with state and locals who have the expertise and intelligence and know-how on the ground and using their authorities. It's a national security issue. The task force funding would employ essentially a platform of these federal agencies combined with subject matter experts, translators of various Chinese dialects in this example, data scientists and targeters, funding to recruit confidential sources, and also coordination with state and local prosecutors. The mandated task force would target them with federal prosecutors as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Urban. The Chinese have become the dominant players in illegal marijuana cultivation. But they are not the only players. How do we make sure the federal government is able to help state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement combat the big guys, the Chinese criminal organizations, as well as the smaller players? Look, in Michigan, earlier this week, a 50-year-old man was arraigned on charges of tax evasion related to an illegal marijuana grow operation that he ran for 2 years. When his home was searched, police found more than 1,000 marijuana plants and 50 pounds of processed marijuana. Just 2 months ago, Michigan State Police seized more than 10 million worth of marijuana at an illegal marijuana grow operation. That grow operation was in a 17,000 square foot warehouse situated on 19 acres. And in June, 4 Chinese nationals were arrested in Michigan for growing $5 million worth of illegal marijuana. Mr. Urban, clearly illegal marijuana grow operations are profitable business, and they are hidden in plain sight. What obstacles do federal, state, and local law enforcement face when trying to combat illegal marijuana grows? What can Congress do to help find, prosecute these farms and those who operate them?
So great question, and continuing on from the first question, the establishment of this task force would be paralleled by federal and state prosecutors that would utilize, like I mentioned earlier, the racketeering, continuing criminal enterprise, and money laundering laws to target command and control leadership at the highest levels in terms of the organized crime groups, the Chinese operating in this area. The task force would also have tactical ability to move from state to state and enforce the law.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. My time is up, and Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Ms. Green from Georgia for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Before my 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter for the record this article, Triad Weed, How Chinese Marijuana Grows Took Over Rural Maine. This is an article that highlights how Chinese TCOs are basically taking over Maine via these illegal grow farms.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to, I apologize, CBP encountered record numbers of Chinese nationals crossing the border under the previous Democrat administration. During the last 4 years, there were over 170,000 Chinese nationals who were encountered nationwide, most of whom were caught crossing between the ports of entry. This does not include the potential Chinese nationals that are among the 2 million gotaways who completely evaded U.S. authorities are now are roaming American communities. Open border policies have consequences, and America's paying the price. In 2024 alone, there were nearly 79,000 Chinese nations encountered at the border. This is up from an average of only 1,500 a year over the previous decade. The majority of Chinese illegally entering the U.S. were single military-age men. 170,000 people, Chinese nationals, is equivalent to more than 176 U.S. Army battalions, or put it another way, they total more than 35 Army brigades, or nearly 12 divisions, or nearly 4 corps, or 3 field armies. That's how we can translate that, just for people's understanding. According to the DEA, Chinese TCOs have become dominant in the U.S. illicit marijuana market, establishing highly sophisticated multi-state operations. In New Mexico, a recent federal indictment exposed a 25-acre farm, 400-acre cultivation scheme on Navajo Nation lands tied to Chinese investors and recruited labor, resulting in the seizure of more than 260,000 plants, 60,000 pounds of marijuana. The networks integrate profits from cannabis into fentanyl trafficking, human smuggling, and global money laundering schemes, creating significant national security challenges, just as our witnesses have stated today. The American people don't know about this. This is, largely believed, especially in younger generations, that marijuana is a good thing, that it helps relieve stress, helps them sleep at night. And then there's also people that use it for PTSD and have success with it. There's medical uses of marijuana, but the American people have no idea that Chinese transnational criminal organizations are involved and that it's leading to other extremely terrible and dangerous crimes, and fentanyl, honestly. Director Anderson, how do these Chinese-backed illegal marijuana operations run? How, for the regular American, they're going, well, how is a crime organization from China able to run a marijuana farm?
These are very, very sophisticated. When I say sophisticated, this is at a level that law enforcement across the nation has never seen before, because they are that sophisticated and that complex. They're layered and they're hidden under many, many layers of LLCs and ownerships. When you begin to look, for example, in Oklahoma, you may have a John Smith who is the owner, the 75% owner of the marijuana grow. And as you dig through that thing, you'll find out that John Smith has never even been to the marijuana grow. John Smith was paid $3,500 to put his name on a license because the Chinese national can't do that in the state of Oklahoma. And that's how that happened in Oklahoma. But you have people in Flushing, New York, and in California that run a lot of stuff across the whole U.S. that may not ever step foot in the state of Oklahoma other than to make a visit every once in a while. But these are very well organized, very sophisticated, and it's not, and whenever I talk about this is really a global thing that's going on with the Chinese nationals. If you look at what's going on down in Latin America, what the Chinese are doing down in Latin America, even to the Caribbean, they're building roads. I mean, they're really investing in stuff, but there's a reason why this is going on. Once again, this comes right back to the U.S., to the national security, and what's going on in as well as to Oklahoma. But you're right. I don't think the majority of the people in the U.S. realize what's going on. People in the marijuana industry really hate on me. They think I'm just against marijuana.
Right.
I'm not. It has, for me, it has nothing to do with marijuana. If someone wants to ingest marijuana, that's their business. For me, it has everything to do with the transnational criminal organizations who are doing things such as trafficking in very large amounts of marijuana. They are laundering billions, not millions. Oklahoma's probably well over $100 billion just for Oklahoma. The murders, the sex trafficking, which is probably one of the most deplorable things that we have to deal with. How we treat other humans like this, I just don't get it. But the rest of the U.S. probably don't know really what's going on. And it's not just Oklahoma. Yeah, Oklahoma's kind of the epicenter of kind of what's going on right now because we do have such a liberal marijuana law. But the sex trafficking, the violent crimes, the underground casinos, the underground banking is going on all across the U.S.
Wow, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. Mr. Chairman, we need to explore how we can help state and federal work together to trace the money and track this down. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields. I now recognize Ms. Ramirez for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chair and Ranking Member. Before we get started, Chairman, I want to ask unanimous consent to include into the record children of couple taken by ICE in Cicero Road Stop speak out, and what happened to Silverio Villegas Gonzalez.
So sorry.
I can do it again.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Chairman. This is our Oversight Committee, and I think it's important to use every opportunity here to do the oversight work. I want to thank the panelists that are here, but I need to talk about what's happening here right now all over the country. And I want to start by saying that the Department of Homeland Security is a national security threat. I call it a force terrorizing communities with good reason. Men in masks, unmarked cars, no badges, no body cameras, and arrests without valid warrants all result in fear, chaos, and harm. And given that this is a subcommittee on oversight, I want to show two clips today. One clip shows DHS agents engaging children whose family members were just abducted. And the second clip you're going to see today shows the murder of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez by DHS agents. Let's watch the footage.
En las inmediaciones del operativo se encontraban una madre y sus hijos, quienes no fueron detenidos y abandonaron el lugar juntos.
Where's all my family?
They're in here. What's your brother? Is he a citizen?
We don't answer questions.
If you tell me he's a citizen, we'll let him go.
We don't answer questions. Look at what you're doing.
Hear the cries of the kids.
If you tell me he's a citizen, we'll let him go.
We don't answer questions. I'm sorry.
He has your phone number, right?
Yeah.
He'll call you.
All right. That's fine. Come on. And what's happening to our car? How
Can you raise the volume?
how am I supposed to take it?
You can take it. That's the key. You can take it.
Hear the cries.
Don't cry. Don't cry, okay? It's okay. Don't cry. Don't cry.
Look, this man, you gotta understand. I just need somebody to talk to me, okay?
It's okay.
Listen, I just need somebody to talk
It's
to
okay.
me.
We're okay.
Okay, listen. No. They said they can go out and take the car. Who's the daughter? Is it you or you?
All of us.
Okay, this is what I need to understand. That's your brother, right?
That's my brother.
Is he born here, yes or no?
We don't answer questions until our lawyers.
Listen, ma'am.
You gotta go.
That's it.
I'm trying to help you out here.
It's okay.
I did it already. We gotta
Yeah, it's fine. We can talk when our lawyer is here. Don't worry. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Come on, don't cry. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Video from this morning shows two ICE agents conducting a vehicle stop. The agents surround the silver car. The driver reverses the vehicle. The officer on the passenger side can be seen pointing his weapon as the driver attempts to flee the scene. As the car drives away, the agent on the driver's side can no longer be seen in this video. In a different surveillance video, 2 gunshots can be heard as the vehicle drives away.
Shot. Let's break it down. In the first video, ICE says the lie. ICE encountered a mother and her 2 children who weren't detained. And then kept asking, are they citizens? If you have a warrant, if you know that they're not citizens, why are you asking if they're citizens? Here's the facts. ICE detained a mother, a father, and their son, a college student that's a dreamer. They encountered the couple's 3 other children and aggressively questioned a 12 and 10-year-old. Given that we know that the parents had no public criminal record, how did DHS agents know to pull them over? We know it's because they're brown. I cannot imagine a parent in this room who would accept their children being questioned without an adult. And if any of my colleagues are at peace with watching that little girl cry, you know what? Miss me with your family values. In the second video, the lie, that ICE statement, he dragged an ICE officer. The footage, the fact, no one was dragged. The lie, he drove at agents. The fact, he drove away from agents. The lie, used appropriate force. The fact, the agent shot Silverio dead. The lie, Silverio had a history of reckless driving. Are the cameras not on? The camera should be on. I mean, I know we're filming. The fact is, he had just 1 moving violation in May 2023. A traffic violation should never amount to a death sentence. We need a full and thorough investigation into what happened. One moment. Is the public seeing this, Chairman? Chairman, is the public seeing this? Are the cameras on? Okay. If you can go ahead and return my time. I think I was at about 30 seconds when we asked about the camera. I'll wait. If it's okay, Chairman, I'll finish my 30 seconds in here.
The gentlelady will hurry.
I want you to look at that face. Silverio was shot. He was the father with full custody of these 2 children. He was shot after he was followed, dropping off his child at daycare. We need a full, thorough investigation. And every single death and separation, every orphan created as Kristi Noem's responsibility. It is why, Mr. Chair, pursuant to Clause 2, Case 6 of Rule 11.1, I move that the committee subpoena Secretary Kristi Noem.
Gentlelady yields. I now recognize Representative Strong for his.
Mr. Chairman, I
Thank you, Chairman McKean, for holding these hearings today. I've already seen how the
Mr. Chairman, I need a response to my request of a subpoena. I didn't get a response.
Gentlelady will state her motion again.
Mr. Chair, pursuant to Clause 2, Case 6 of Rule 11, I move that the committee subpoena Secretary Kristi Noem.
All right, the committee will stand in recess. All right. Will be in order, resuming. The gentlelady had a motion on the table.
Mr. Chairman, motion to table.
And the gentleman has now indicated his desire to table that motion.
I second.
The gentlelady has seconded. All those in favor of tabling the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
I think I have to do it by
Mr. Chairman, I request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Green.
Aye.
Ms. Green votes aye. Mr. Strong.
Aye.
Mr. Strong votes aye. Mr. Ogles.
Aye.
Mr. Ogles votes aye. Mr. Knott.
Aye.
Mr. Knott votes aye. Mr. Garbarino. Mr. Tanadar.
No.
Mr. Tanadar votes no. Mrs. Ramirez.
No.
Mrs. Ramirez votes no. Mr. Carter.
How's the chairman recorded?
The chairman has not yet been recorded.
Chairman votes aye.
Chairman Burkeen votes aye. Mr. Carter is not recorded.
Mr. Carter votes no.
Mr. Carter votes no. Mr. Green of Texas. Ranking Member Thompson.
Any other members not voted? Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 5 ayes and 3 noes.
The ayes have it. Motion to table is adopted. All right, we are back on the agenda. I now recognize the gentleman from Alabama for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman Burkeen, for holding this hearing today. We've already seen how the CCP took advantage of the open border policies of the previous administration to provide precursors to fentanyl that have wreaked havoc all over this nation and all over the world. In an effort to kill a generation of Americans, not Republicans, not Democrats, but Americans, the Mexican cartel cannot make fentanyl without the precursor from China. These illegal marijuana farms are another example of how brazen the CCP will be. Earlier this week, we talked about how foreign adversaries see U.S. agriculture not only as an economic target, but also a homeland security vulnerability. Mr. Larkin, how significant is land acquisition to the broader strategy of Chinese criminal groups operating in America?
It's helpful to them in 2 very different ways. First, it allows them to use the property to grow illicit drugs, to process them, and then use that site as a distribution point. But it's also possible to do that in places that would allow them to try to use that area for spying on nearby facilities. For example, if you had an indoor rather than an outdoor grow, you could not only use that as a basis for developing marijuana that you can then ship elsewhere in the state or across the nation. You can also use that as a place perhaps for spying on nearby Americans or American bases or other sensitive targets. So it's a very dangerous sort of circumstance we have.
I think you're exactly right. You start thinking about it. I asked the State Department, how many acres does China own or lease in America? Sometime back, might have been a year or two. And I remember they said, we'll get back with you. Then all of a sudden we found out 380,000 acres are either owned or leased by China of American soil. Then we peeled the onion back a little further, and what did it say? We found out that where's this property located? It's around our largest military installations in America. And what's unbelievable, we actually got a bipartisan bill, had Democrats that crossed over because they know that this is a threat to America. When your agents do uncover these foreign backgrow operations, what obstacles do you face in proving the criminal ties and actually shutting them down? Yes, sir.
Problem is, my mistake. The problem is federal law doesn't require in detail identification of all the different organizations, entities, companies, or people that have an interest in particular property. You can obscure it in that way. One way this Congress could address this problem is by making clear that you have to identify any and all foreign nationals, particularly Chinese foreign nationals who are potentially associated with the PRC or the CCP, as being real parties in interest in either acquisitions of property by purchase or by leasing, so that you can then put the onus on the people who are the property owners as well as the real estate people to make them help the federal government identify when the PRC and the CCP is involved.
Thank you, Mr. Larkin. Our national security strategy says China is the only country with both the intent and the ability to reshape the international order. It also calls China the Pentagon's top challenge. While our military has been focused on China for some time, do you think other departments like DHS need to increase their focus on China's influence here at home?
I do. I think one of the problems is the American public doesn't understand the role that China plays in the illicit drug trafficking and other activities that are damaging to the nation.
Thank you. Mr. Urban, you've spent years investigating transnational money laundering networks. How significant a threat are Chinese networks to our financial system compared to other global actors?
Chinese money launderers, their networks over the last 7 years, they've become the dominant money launderers for transnational organized crime around the world. They are the primary launderers for the Mexican drug cartels. For example, when they became the dominant money launderers 2017, 18, or 19, they increased the net profits of the Mexican cartels, the designated terrorist organizations, by our estimation of 3 to 5% of their bottom line. The way to attack those networks is with high-level prosecutions against command and control. FinCEN several weeks ago came out with additional guidance on compliance, AML, red flag, in terms of Chinese money laundering within the United States. We need to attack it with significant authorities and funding.
If you could recommend one federal action that would immediately disrupt Chinese TCO operations in the U.S., what would that be and why?
Quickly.
Proper funding and authority and mandate for the federal government through a task force to go after those networks aggressively in the next year with racketeering type charges.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Carter for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. For decades, the federal government's decision to criminalize marijuana has been nothing short of disastrous for our communities, for our economy, and for justice in America. The failed war against cannabis has especially devastated Black and brown communities. Arrest and incarceration rates for marijuana offenses have been wildly disproportionate, with people of color far more likely to be targeted despite using marijuana at similar rates as white Americans. These policies have fueled mass incarceration, separating families, stripping people of opportunities, and saddling them with criminal records that create lifelong barriers to housing, education, and employment. This has entrenched cycles of poverty and inequality, all in the name of a policy that the American people increasingly reject. Beyond the human costs, prohibition has created a lucrative illicit market. By outlawing marijuana rather than regulating it, the federal government allowed billions of dollars to flow through the underground economy. That money could have gone toward tax revenue, community investments, and public health, but instead, it has enriched criminal enterprise and fueled violence. Today, with most Americans supporting legalization, it is past time that we acknowledge the truth. Marijuana prohibition has failed. The regulated cannabis industry is not the same as what we were discussing today. The state legal cannabis industry employs over 425,000 people and operate in 40 states, including my home state of Louisiana. State-regulated cannabis programs require rigorous product testing for contaminants, pesticides, and alterants, and potency, sometimes entirely absent from the illicit marketplace. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record this letter from the United States Cannabis Roundtable, the advocacy organization for the regulated state-licensed cannabis industry. This letter includes more details about how legalization can combat foreign criminal cartels.
Without objection, so
The real
ordered.
choice isn't cannabis or not, or isn't cannabis or no cannabis. It's whether we let foreign criminal networks run the show, or whether we empower regulated American businesses that test, track, and play by the rules. If we want to dismantle foreign criminal networks and protect American communities, then we need to strengthen, not weaken, regulated markets. That means financial transparency, clear rules, and a federal framework that allows law enforcement to focus on fentanyl and other real threats to our community. Mr. Larkin, in a recent report from the Heritage Foundation, you've recommended against rescheduling cannabis, but even President Trump has expressed support for rescheduling. Like President Trump, I believe we should end endless arrests for cannabis conduct and focus on the real bad guys, those who are pushing fentanyl and other deadly forms of drugs. Why do you oppose President Trump's support for rescheduling, especially since that means we can both recognize medical uses and a better aligned law enforcement priorities?
It would be a mistake, legally, medically, and from policy perspective, to reschedule cannabis from 1 to 3, and it would also be a mistake, even more so, to legalize it. I wrote in an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association Psychiatry multiple reasons why legally, medically, and policy-wise, the rescheduling would be a mistake.
Mr. Larkin, have you expressed...
I can give you one in particular.
Just a second. Have you expressed your concern with the Trump administration?
I published it in the Journal of the American Medical Association. That's the way think tanks do things. I haven't talked to anybody in the Trump administration. But I can tell you one thing that is absolutely true. For 80-plus years, the United States has trusted the Food and Drug Administration with the responsibility to decide what is a drug and whether it's safe and effective.
I'm going to reclaim my time because I only got 25 seconds. You argue in your testimony that state legalization has not eliminated the illicit black market. But isn't it true that we have legalized cannabis in most of our states? It remains illegal at the federal level, which is why, despite paying millions of dollars in taxpayer dollars, licensed operators are often shut out of traditional banking services and are forced to operate in cash. When a legitimate operator is shut out of banking, it makes it harder for law enforcement to trace transactions, determine who is compliant and who is not. Wouldn't law enforcement and public safety be better served by a federally regulated system to track the flow of marijuana businesses, processing, and distribution, thus making it clear who the real operators are versus the Chinese who are inundating our communities with marijuana that may in fact be tainted?
No. The Chinese will also take advantage of any legally sellable cannabis product. They make money not only from illicit sales, but from lawful sales. And they actually try to focus on states that have medical or recreational programs so that they can have lawful sales, big outdoor grows, and the like. Ask my colleague.
The chairman has been very generous. My time is up, but I'll ask you a final question as that part. Is it your assertion that all marijuana should be illegal? Is it your assertion that all cannabis should be illegal, medicinal and or recreational?
Yes, because the Food and Drug
Yes or no?
Administration.
Yes, yes.
No, the Food and Drug.
No, I'm replaying my
Gentleman's
time.
time has expired. I now recognize Representative Ogles for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record resolution number 25109 from Siskiyou County, California Board of Supervisors, requesting that Governor Newsom of California proclaim a state of emergency regarding illegal pesticides and illicit cannabis operations. So ordered.
So ordered.
Now, I want to be clear. The CCP is the existential threat to the United States of America. The CCP has set up operations to leverage cannabis operations, both illegal and, as you say, Mr. Larkin, legal operations in this country. They work hand in hand with the cartels in Mexico to undermine this country. So what is, in fact, a threat to the United States is not Homeland Security, but it's China and the Mexican cartels. Unfortunately, instead of having a hearing on the CCP and illicit activities in our country, some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are more interested in protecting their suppliers for their personal use than they are of fulfilling their duty and protecting this country. And I, for one, have had enough of this nonsense. We need to recognize the truth that the CCP is setting up operations in this country. They want to destroy this country. They want to see us on bended knee. And I say, hell no. So whether it's 1, 3 on the schedule, whether it's legal or illegal, we have to recognize the fact that the CCP is within our borders, they're buying our farmland, and they're growing whatever they can grow that they can make money off of. And my colleagues need to wake up and have an honest conversation about those facts instead of grandstanding and, again, protecting their own suppliers. Mr. Urban, are Chinese TCOs laundering money in connection to these illicit marijuana grow operations, and to what extent are they relying on pre-existing China money laundering networks in the United States?
So the pre-existing Chinese money laundering networks, those networks funded this substantial increase in Chinese organized crime cultivation marijuana operations. They're the ones that funded it and stood this up on a massive basis. For example, I never focused on marijuana trafficking during my career in DEA prior to this. What got my attention is when Chinese money launderers took over money laundering for the Mexican cartels in approximately 2018. As we stood up this intelligence gathering effort to understand Chinese organized crime, we were shocked at the marijuana grows that were in Northern California, exploiting the land, exploiting our money, our banking laws, our mortgage laws, taking water, taking electricity. The theft of it was just unbelievable. So we recognized that not only do we have to attack the Chinese money laundering network, but we also had an opportunity, right, and a need to attack the Chinese cultivation grows that were happening throughout the United States, Colorado, Oklahoma, California, Maine, and elsewhere. The Chinese money launderers are the ones that funded this and set this up. That's why you saw so much money and the scale happen so quickly.
Mr. Urban, just a few weeks ago, the Department of Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, I'm on financial services, which regulates that organization, highlighted the role of Chinese money laundering networks in partnering with the Mexican drug cartels to launder drug profits. How does the earned money from illegal marijuana trafficking facilitate their money laundering activities? And quite frankly, when you look at the supply chain that they are setting up, what other illicit goods may also be, such as human trafficking, are part of that supply chain?
One component of the organized crime revenue feeds the other. So for example, The money launderers and the ability to purchase land and goods throughout the United States for cultivation assist the money launderers, the human trafficking component. And getting back to the national security component to this, all of these revenue streams that is benefiting Chinese organized crime promotes and provides access points throughout our United States government, promotes access to different places that they can corrupt, financial institutions that they can undermine.
FinCEN recently warned the Chinese money laundering networks pushed over $300 billion through U.S. financial institutions in just 5 years. How much of that volume do you believe is linked directly or indirectly to illicit marijuana operations?
The majority or the significant component to that was the proceeds of Mexican cartel drug trafficking. A significant material component to that, right, I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but you're talking billions of dollars, was the illicit marijuana trade. It like essentially put on steroids Chinese organized crime within the United States, the money they made off marijuana cultivation.
I want to thank the witnesses. I apologize I didn't have questions for you, and I thank you to the chairman.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Knott for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Urban, I want to talk to you quickly about some of the misconceptions out there, but criminal organizations, the best ones are the hardest to catch. They have a proficiency of layering in camouflage, making it very difficult to apprehend, to investigate. And in my time with law enforcement, there's some easy pickings, the guys that are walking around the sidewalk with an AK-47. That's easy. But it's the folks who are moving the currency, who are masking illegal with legal activities, so on and so forth. And I want you to talk to us a little bit about how the Chinese criminals have successfully hidden in polite society. Because when I investigated marijuana cultivation that was illegal, they had a very intricate network of legal front businesses that enabled them to move millions of dollars that looked legitimate. But when you start to peel the onion back, it was a pretty harrowing viewpoint. So talk to us about how they are successful in bedding in polite society.
So they become so successful as to exactly what you said because they're being controlled by the top echelon of Chinese organized crime, some of the most sophisticated operators in the world. They're very sophisticated and disciplined in the sense that they engage in what we would view as low-risk criminal activities, the money laundering. The violent component to what Mr. Anderson stated, that's only more recently. They try to stay away from violence or what would, have federal prosecutors become interested in prosecuting them, hence marijuana trafficking, money laundering, human smuggling. They also rely on this network in the Chinese underground banking system that's been around for years. And lastly, we touched upon this. It's very difficult to recruit confidential sources to engage these networks, and wiretap these networks on WeChat is impossible.
Yep. And in terms of the state structures, the state legalities, we were promised if you legalize it, you'll see less illegal marijuana. If you legalize it, there won't be nearly as many incidents with toxicities and so forth. In my experience prosecuting these cases, they used a sloppy legalization effort to almost balloon the amount of marijuana they were able to traffic. It was illegal in many instances, but the sloppy legal structures has brought about a greater problem in many respects.
So we don't have the regulatory component to this in place that would negate subsidizing or allowing organized crime on a national basis to exploit the marijuana market.
And in your, one of the things that is often misstated, it's framed as though you have a marijuana dealer and then every other type of criminal. In my experience, organized crime touches the full spectrum when they get to a certain level: methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl. Marijuana is just one component of it. So to splice it out is often an inaccurate assumption. Is that your experience?
Absolutely.
Yep. Mr. Larkin, briefly, you mentioned, I'll give you a chance to answer the question that Mr. Carter asked. Would it be wise, yes or no, to legalize marijuana in the country, in your opinion?
No, it would not.
Why?
It is a problematic drug when you use it heavily or on a long-term basis. What I was going to say in response to the answer is we have not only the Controlled Substances Act at work here, we also have the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. For 80 years, we've trusted the FDA with deciding what is a drug and whether it is safe, effective, and uniformly made. The FDA could not say the cannabis plant is safe, effective, and uniformly made because it's not.
Well, one of the mistruths that proponents say is that there really isn't any problematic effects to marijuana. And it was interesting because when I was prosecuting organized crime, I only had a few cases, but they were really big cases in terms of quantity, in terms of sophistication, dealing with marijuana, but they targeted young people. Please describe the effects that young people suffer when they are exposed to high levels of marijuana on a continued basis.
The juvenile brain is in a labile state, particularly in men. It doesn't come fully formed until early in the 20s. And the problem is the THC content of cannabis today is not what it was back in the days of Woodstock. Back then, it was 3 to 6% THC. Now, in the plants, it can be up to 40%, and in processed forms, it can be 90%.
Has there been a successful state system that controls the supply of marijuana to deliver only safe product to the consumer?
Not to my knowledge. The problem is there is too great an amount of disuniformity in the product that's being sold. A few years ago, Nora Volkow, the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, said we don't have in place the mechanisms to make sure that what is being sold lacks the pesticides that we know are coming from China and that are creating problems. And will create even bigger problems 10 to 20 years down the road when we start seeing spikes in areas where there is a greater incidence of cancer because of it.
Well, thank you, witnesses, for your testimony. I'm sorry I'm out of time. Mr. Anderson, I had a lot of questions for you lined up, but maybe we'll get a second round if we're fortunate, and if not, I hope to have you back. Mr. Chairman, I do have a UC request. I've got an example here. It's a Department of Justice press release detailing 7 Chinese nationals and their roles in money laundering millions of dollars and smuggling kilograms of illegal marijuana.
Gentleman asked that it be put in the record without objection.
Thank you.
So ordered. Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Green for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the ranking member as well. The Chinese money laundering that's taking place, why is it so difficult for us to understand how it's being done and to prevent it from being done?
Yes, sir. They came to dominate the industry for several reasons. One, in the past, there was always a certain cost to money laundering. It was 7 to 10%, certainly, to get those funds back to the Mexican cartel. The Chinese money launderers changed the game in that, one, they absorbed all the risk of laundering those funds. 2, they did it for 1 to 2%. 3, the funds that are collected, the bulk cash from sales of narcotics in this country that they take ownership or custody of, they began to sell to Chinese nationals that wanted to invest in the United States. They do this globally with a trusted network with what's called the Chinese underground banking system. And last but certainly not least, they utilize the encrypted app called WeChat, which is controlled and monitored in mainland China, that US law enforcement cannot have any judicial process. We can't wiretap it. So what it allows for is that organized crime network globally to communicate with trust and speed. No other organized crime group in the world has ever had a communication system similar to this.
And are they using cryptocurrency? Explain, please.
Yes. So certainly in the last 2 years, the crypto component of the money laundering cycle has taken on a much more substantial role. As crypto is being used more and more globally, it's actually taken on more of a role in the money laundering process because the Mexican cartels would like to receive those funds in crypto. So it's part of the process now.
How do you recommend that we deal with this, given that we now have these electronic transfers? Makes it rather difficult to, I want to stop it. I'm just trying to get a sense from you as experts as to how we can do it.
So the networks that exist right here within the United States, those Chinese money launderers on a daily basis pick up that bulk cash. So what we were talking about earlier of this interagency task force that was designed to go after Chinese organized crime with severe penalties such as the racketeering laws should be stood up and funded. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in terms of what we saw last couple of weeks ago from FinCEN, that directive to the banking industry to enhance compliance, red flag reporting on the money laundering transactions. And lastly, WeChat itself needs to be impacted. It cannot be utilized by Chinese money launderers on an ongoing basis, again, in this trusted network where they can communicate and move money.
The suspicious activity reports are not enough for this large sum of money?
It's not enough in the sense that financial institutions, crypto companies, wire remitters need to enhance and increase the suspicious activity reporting and their AML compliance to focus on Chinese money laundering networks.
Well, let me just close with this. I'm new to this money laundering, and I'm trying to make sure that I get a better understanding of it. And I believe that my understanding of what's happening in financial services can help me with what's happening here in Homeland Security. Is there any piece of legislation that you would call to my attention that might be helpful? Is there anything that you would have us do in terms of legislation?
Over the last 18 months, the Fend-Off Act and the HALT Act were good examples of successes in terms of the legislative process. What I would suggest is this interagency task force that needs to be stood up nationally with the mandate to go after Chinese organized crime, fully funded, data scientists, Mandarin translators, everything that's needed on that task force to attack the network. The second part is the racketeering laws need to be imposed on Chinese organized crime, and there needs to be a legislative or some sort of executive branch solution with the Chinese government when it comes to WeChat, so it's not utilized on a global basis by Chinese organized crime. Again, through legislative process that allows law enforcement to wiretap it, or some negotiated strategy with the Chinese government where they negate the ability of WeChat to be utilized.
Yes, sir, if the chair would permit.
It's also worth looking into the problem that people are obscuring, as your colleague said, through a lot of different layers of dummy corporations, who the real parties in interest are. We need to start requiring that the real parties in interest be identified before, whenever they are part of Chinese organized crime or a foreign government that is adverse to our interests. Because the easier you make it for law enforcement to try to see who really is owning this property and therefore what's going on at it, the easier it might be for law enforcement to take steps to stop the money laundering and the ultimate activity itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields. If our panel of experts would be willing, given the inability to dive a little deeper, I wish we would have gotten to in the middle of this. There's going to be a few of us that stick around and ask a few more questions. If the panel, if you've got time to expedite this for your sake and ours, I'm going to ask the committee members limit their time to 3 minutes. And so with that, I'm going to go out of order here. I'm going to let Representative Ogles go first. I'll follow through with anybody on the Democrat side, and then Democratic side. And if Mr. Knott, you want to follow him, and then I'll go last, and I'll watch my time because I've got a time constraint. All right. So with that said, Representative Ogles, you are recognized for 3 minutes.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the witnesses. Director Anderson, it seems like these illegal grow operations are run by a core criminal element that oversee low-level workers who are often victims of trafficking. Is this an accurate description based on your experience?
Yes, sir. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. It is, you have upper management, very well organized transnational criminal organizations, but with that comes every other crime with it, which is the human trafficking, the labor trafficking, the sex trafficking, and the violent crime, and every other crime that follows underneath it.
Now, is there, from your experience, a difference that you've seen between the immigration status of the low-level workers versus the higher-level criminals that are actually operating these networks?
Well, there's a definite difference between the two. So your high-level transnational criminal organization. You're a person who's running operations. They look different, they dress different, they drive different vehicles, and then your migrant worker comes in, you know, once again, they look different, they dress different, how they dress, how they speak, to even how they address you, meaning me in law enforcement, is totally different. But there is a big, significant difference between the two. Yes, sir.
So is it fair to say, when you look at the complexity of this problem, that the high-level organizers, the traffickers, the low-level individuals that they are using in these illicit activities, they're literally throwaways? That if they get caught, if they get incarcerated, they'll just replace them with someone else?
Those are basically what we call victims.
That's right. Mr. Larkin, to what extent is the CCP tied to these Chinese TCOs operating in the United States? Do you believe that the CCP is aware of the Chinese nationals who leave China to establish criminal operations in the United States?
China is the most heavily surveilled nation in the world. It's difficult to believe that the CCP is unaware of people who are engaged in criminal activities in other nations, like what's happening here with Chinese organized crime. And keep in mind, you don't have to prove an affirmative agreement between them. All you have to do is show through circumstantial evidence that the CCP is aware of and is helping out the organized crime measures. If you look at the statements the three of us have submitted, you'll see there are various types of evidence that points to knowledge by the CCP and the PRC of what is going on in Chinese organized crime. And that's the sort of evidence that the Supreme Court has said would be sufficient to justify a guilty verdict for conspiracy to engage in this activity.
I want to thank you to the witnesses. Thank you to the chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Representative Thanadar for 3 minutes for his questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Illegal marijuana grows are a threat. Marijuana grown illegally can be saturated with chemicals and that are dangerous to humans. The money generated by selling illegal marijuana on the black market funds criminal organizations. And the illegal grows bring all sorts of crime and destruction into American communities. The federal government needs a coordinated strategy to do all it can to shut down these illegal marijuana grows. I think we can all agree on that. Nevertheless, the Trump administration is eliminating the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, which is the largest anti-crime task force in the country. For 40 years, OCDETF has helped disrupt and dismantle criminal networks with a drug-centric focus until Donald Trump. First, Trump wrongly expanded OCDETF's mission to focus on illegal immigration. Now, President Trump has a budget request that eliminates OCDETF entirely. Mr. Urban, in your experience at the DEA, how would you describe the role of OCDETF plays in combating illegal drug trafficking? And do you think that eliminating OCDETF will help combat illegal marijuana cultivation, particularly by the Chinese criminal organizations?
So during my career, I called it OCDF, so I'll refer to it as OCDF, sorry. There was a tremendous benefit for OCDF. One, it synchronized manpower and the agencies to work together. It designated the targets, the top levels of organized crime that we were going to target collectively, and then it also funded that. So it was a mechanism to synchronize federal law enforcement, and it was very successful. I would suggest, A, you either utilize OCDF or you bring the equivalent and successes of OCDF are necessary to go after Chinese organized crime, the Mexican cartels, et cetera.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yeah, sure.
What does that acronym stand for, do you know?
Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Recognize the gentleman, Mr. Knott, for 3 minutes.
Mr. Anderson, I've got a question for you. In terms of your experience in local law enforcement, what effect over the last 20 years plus of your career has international criminal activity had on the local law enforcement community? You. Yep.
I'm sorry. Well, the international crime has had a huge impact on our local law enforcement community. So understand almost every precursor used to manufacture methamphetamine, fentanyl, or any other illicit manufactured drug like that comes from China to the cartels to across the rest of the U.S., which that's affecting every community across the U.S. But also with that is the underlying crimes such as the homicides, the sex trafficking, all the other crimes that come along right along with it, which it affects every community in the U.S. So it affects absolutely everyone. No one's immune from it. Oklahoma is a very rural state of 4 million people, and we're devastated by transnational criminal organizations.
In terms of the open border of the last 4 years, how did that affect organized crime in your local communities?
So I understand, and I got to say this. First off, I'm not a politician. I'm not even a political.
I'm not asking. I was in law enforcement before I ran here.
But I have to say that because it's going to sound like I am.
Nope, I'm asking you your perspective.
I'm telling you, and I've seen it both ways.
Yep.
I've seen when we couldn't get anything. I mean, matter of fact, we were on a T3, and we was purchasing kilos of methamphetamine, and Trump closed the border down during COVID. Nothing.
Yep.
I mean, it was 6 months.
And cocaine, and
Anything.
heroin, and crack, all of it.
And then we leave, we change administrations, we're flooded, we're inundated with controlled dangerous substances. Once again, I'm not making a political statement, I'm telling you what I've seen.
And what effect does that have on law enforcement? Can you successfully fight crime with an open border?
With an open border?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
And in regards to the task force model linking federal and state law enforcement, have you had any kind of experiences with that in your career?
I have. I'm actually a task force guy. I operated a task force for many years. On that task force was including federal agents and local agents.
Yep.
And we still currently operate with our federal partners on task forces.
In terms of force multiplication on the good side of the ledger, in my opinion, there's no greater way than task forcing federal and local jurisdictions together. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with it, and we do it every day. Whenever I came into the Bureau 6 years ago, we were down to approximately 50 agents. We're up to around 130 now. That's primarily because we TFO, task force officers.
Yep, and I've long been an advocate, sir, that every federal law enforcement agency should utilize and grow their task force program because international crime affects every community, large and small, across the country. Isn't that true?
That is absolutely correct.
Well, Mr. Anderson, thank you. I'm glad I got a second round to ask you questions. To all the witnesses, please come back and talk to us about this important topic. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. We're concluding here. Last thoughts. We have 3 minutes, so essentially a minute each. Mr. Urban, final thought.
We've demonstrated what the effect is on the communities. We have the intelligence. I would ask that you fully fund a task force to attack these networks. This is not that hard. It's tough work, it's difficult, it's challenging, but fund a task force and give them the mandate to attack these networks with individuals like Mr. Anderson, please.
Mr. Larkin.
In the short run, the most important thing to do is educate the people in your communities about these problems. I think when people think of drug problems, they think of Mexico. They don't think of China. They have some idea that China is involved in selling fentanyl precursors, but they don't realize the full extent of the tentacles that China has extended into the United States. The public needs to know this. Holding this hearing is important, but it is also important that you tell the people in your communities about what is happening. Remember, the Chinese are playing the long game. They can do this for decades, for centuries. They don't care. But we can't do that. We have to act now.
Mr. Anderson.
I think it is imperative that we educate the public on what's going on in the nation, especially when it comes to the CCP and the rest of the world. And the movement that we know that we are seeing that is going on and transpiring. And when you're talking about the long game, they're in the long game. They've been doing this for many, many years. And when we talk about what's going on with the money laundering between and the precursors since we can go all the way back to 2007. That's what we know for sure whenever the cartels started reaching out to the people in China and making these deals. That's how far back it's went. So we're already into the long game. One thing I would ask legislation to do and to seriously look at, I do think we're better whenever we bring all of our resources together and we combat a problem, because you're talking about a really huge global network. We have to bring our people together, we have to bring our experts together, and we have to fight this within. I would also ask that this legislation looks at the Communication Act of 1996. If you look at, and you've been a federal prosecutor, you look at how we've dismantled criminal organizations across the U.S., we've done it through that act. That act is outdated. The criminal element has surpassed us. We can't do the cases like we used to because of all these encrypted apps that are floating around on everyone's phones. So I would ask that you look at that as well. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you inviting us to be here today.
It's clear from this hearing that the CCP is in a coordinated attack against the United States of America, whether it's through their trafficking network, the cyber attacks, or facilitation of the Mexican cartels. They have declared an asymmetric war on this country, and it's time that we fight back with all the tools and resources that we have at our disposal. I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for the witnesses, and we ask the witnesses to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7E, the hearing record will be open for 10 days. Without objection, we're adjourned.